No dramatic intro or real script for this one, my disciples. I'm burned out and tired, so this time I'm covering something easier and a bit less grim, primarily as a change of pace. Some dark topics will be mentioned, of course, albeit noticeably less. Also, I'm gonna have to use footage of a game rather than from I cannot pronounce that correctly, so fuck it, I'll say it however I wish. But I can't use footage from it directly, both due to copyright and because you're better off watching it yourself, either in Dutch or the English AI dub, whichever you really wish to dabble in, albeit I'll show pictures of characters when necessary. Anyway, now to go over the three main Ongezellig characters before I talk about anything else. Starting with one of the main characters, Maya. She's one of the central protagonists of Ongezellig, a Dutch student struggling with ADD and social anxiety and possibly autism, and has two adoptive sisters, Coco and Mai, who we'll also be talking about. Interesting background detail on her character is that there's 3 maps visible hung up on the back wall of the classroom, each one behind one of the 3 sisters. The first and third ones are political maps of Japan and South Africa, which correspond to Mai and Coco respectively. But behind Maya there's an outline of Europe in grey and Indonesia in red overlapped on top, which implies she might be of Indonesian origin, albeit this is just a background detail applying to all 3 sisters, and where they have supposedly come from, as far as the lore is concerned. But anyway, talking about her personality, she's a loner, introverted and diagnosed with the ADD, social anxiety and possible autism, preferring to spend her time alone and avoiding contact with others, struggling very heavily in social situations. Like, she's terribly afraid of talking to other people, and as a result she has no friends, except 2 imaginary ones, who appear in a roleplay in her own head. She has a coping mechanism for her feelings, and it is possible she may suffer from suicidal thoughts, albeit this is shown to be a mere roleplay in her own head when she's coping with her feelings, as I already mentioned. This method of coping with her feelings also extends to how she copes with her feelings of other people, another example of this being the imagination island she creates in her mind, in where she views Coco as this Miss Perfect princess thing, and Maya as a ridiculous cartoon character, that being SpongeBob. But when it comes to her actual feelings on others, Maya is incredibly spiteful, and thinks everyone views her negatively or is conspiring against her or just wants something from her, even her own sister Coco. And she views herself incredibly negatively as well, going as far as to believe that she isn't worth introducing to other people. The outro song for Ongezellig, if you pay attention to the lyrics when they're translated to English, they reflect this idea too. Maya, as a character, overall sees herself as not worth introducing to others. She sees no worth in herself and is trapped in a cycle of self-hatred, denial and isolation, propagated by her false worldview of being worthless and needing nobody when she clearly does. Like, she very clearly wants to have an emotional connection with someone, but due to her false worldview of everyone viewing her negatively and her own self-hatred, she genuinely doesn't feel like she's worth introducing to anyone, trapping her in a vicious cycle. And it's very clear that people do care about her. Her sister Coco goes out of her way to make sure she's okay, albeit Maya rejects her because she doesn't feel like she's worth it. In fact, I'm going to put the lyrics to the English translation for the outro on screen now, and just taking a moment to read them, they're pretty miserable. Albeit they're nowhere near as dark and gritty and depressing as some of the previous subjects we've covered on this series, like the Cry of Fear ones especially. And anyway, that's all there really is to say for Maya. I will be ignoring the characterization from the comic Maya's Sweet 16 and the secret diary found via the email in Sweet 16, as Studio Masa, the creator of Ongezellig, no longer considers these canon. Anyway, with that, that's Maya covered. Now to talk about Mai. Mai is one of the 2 adopted sisters in Ongezellig. She has a fierce interest for Dutch history and culture, running away from home and making her way to the Netherlands, Mai being born in Nagasaki, Japan. Her doing this because she prefers the Netherlands over Japan. Regarding her interests, pretty much all of them revolve around Dutch culture, which is further bolstered by her patriotism towards anything Dutch. Mai having a particular interest in the Dutch East India Company, VOC, and the colonialism part of Dutch history. Regarding her characterization, however, she is somewhat supportive of her sisters, albeit she tends to look out for herself more so. She has a devoutly patriotic view of the Netherlands and despises the mere existence of Belgium and the Belgians, believing them to not be a race. And while this often gets her called racist, Studio Masa have come out and made a statement about this in like a big document thing that's to do with all like stuff about Ongezellig because it never got finished, so like, anyway, just whatever. In summary, there's a massive document about Ongezellig and like information about its lore and stuff about the characters that was released by Studio Masa. And in summary, Maya's only real problem with Belgium is that it exists at all. If Belgium were to completely cease existing, all her prejudices will disappear like snow in the sun. But anyway, moving on. In further regards to her personality, she has megalomaniac and egocentric tendencies, evident by the things she's interested in and how she reacts when she doesn't achieve class representative. as she immediately becomes irrational and believes that her toy gun can shoot and possibly kill her teacher Vera in an act she describes as a, and I quote, "schoolercourse," end quote. I can't take that term seriously. I know what it's supposed to mean, but it's just such a stupid way of saying it. Anyway, that's Maya. Now to talk about Coco. Coco, who's adopted from South Africa, we actually got a bit of lore on the background of what happened to her parents. Her father and pregnant mother were killed in an accident involving a lightning strike, which generally makes me question how the hell that happened. Like, there's not much information, it's just that a lightning strike killed them in an accident. So, were they messing with something electrical and then a bolt of lightning from that killed them? It's never really elaborated on, we just have this piece of information in a document and that's it. But anyway, the loss of her parents and unborn sibling is the cause of her affection towards her new family, her pent-up anger and chronic existential angst. She also exists as the antithesis to Maya, from a writing perspective. Personality-wise, she's naive and innocent but kind-hearted and supportive, albeit easily infuriated, such as when Coco is personally attacked in sensitive subjects. A prime example being when Maya brings up the loss of her parents. As a result, Coco is shown to act irrationally and give Maya a death threat by hanging her out the window, albeit only partially. But when it comes to her usual self, she goes out of her way to be as kind and friendly with others as she can, which has resulted in her having numerous friends. Meanwhile, Maya has none, making her Maya's complete opposite, which in turn feeds into Maya's spite, which was mentioned previously. And that's all there really is to say about Coco. And with that, that's the three main characters. Now talk about the side character, Vera, the teacher. She does not have much character as she doesn't have much screen time, albeit she can be best described as a tired, depressed, angry alcoholic, who despises the three sisters, albeit she seems to hate Mai Mai the most. As in Deal 3, when we see Mai Mai's entry on Vera's dossier, Mai Mai's entry description can barely be seen in the bottom right corner of the screen. The Dutch translation for the dialogue says, "I hate this youngling so much." I have to say youngling rather than the actual C word because YouTube doesn't allow that at the time of recording this, which is the 10th of December 2024. For context, the C word I'm not allowed to say relates to what we actually call young humans. I can't even say the K word version either. Like, it is absolutely ridiculous right now. But anyway, getting that out of the way, now to talk about Ongezellig, what it could have been, why it was cancelled and stuff like that. In regards to that, there were ideas for other episodes, and in order of potential all not figured out and hence them being non-canon, we're gonna go through them. Starting with the first one, Maya's friend Iko discovers Mai Mai's whereabouts and enters the class disguised as a Korean exchange student, who I forgot to mention, Iko is the biological sister of Mai Mai and is searching for her after she ran away from Japan. Albeit this is not mentioned in the show and is only mentioned in the document. But anyway, she manipulates Maya into a friendship with the goal of kidnapping Mai Mai and taking her back to Japan. Secondly, we have Mai Mai vs Santa Claus, in which Sinterklaas enlists the help of Mai Mai to drive Santa out of Holland for good. For context, Sinterklaas is the Netherlands equivalent of Christmas. It has its own traditions and I advise you look into Sinterklaas yourself. But anyway, moving on. Next we have Coco stops bullying, in which Coco discovers that Maya is being bullied, whereupon Coco stalks and gaslights the bully until he finally goes insane. Next we have Mai Mai conquers Belgium, in which Mai Mai and Kiki declare war on Belgium and occupy the enclave of no man's land in North Brabant. Kiki being this one background character who dresses like a pirate. In fact, I'm just going to show this image of the classmates on screen so you can see what's going on. Next we have Maya becomes a band member, in which Coco gives Maya a spot in her band as a triangle player, as to give her the idea of a group of friends, but discovers that's not how it works. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier when talking about Coco's character, but Coco plays for the school rugby team, and is in a band, in which she is the drummer. The band being a Eurobeat folk band called Running in the 60s. Cleo playing the guitar, Zoe playing the bass guitar, and I can't pronounce that name, YFKE playing the synthesizer. All of this being only mentioned in a document and not in the show because it never got past the pilot. Albeit the drums do briefly appear in the pilot towards the end, in the background of Coco's room. Or Mai Mai's, I don't know. It's off to the left of Maya's room. But anyway, moving on. The next one is class representative elections, in which Mai Mai tries to become the class representative at the expense of Kiki's pirate party. Next up we have Maya's cat. Her cat Noga had to be put to sleep and Maya reflects on how her only friend is taken from her for the second time. Next we have Queen Mai Mai, in which Mai Mai realizes that marrying Princess Amalia is her only chance to actually become Queen of the Netherlands. And then there's just one called End, which anticlimactically has no information, which basically doesn't give us much information outside of, instead of putting a concrete end on it, they're just going to leave it open because otherwise it'd be anticlimactic. And with that, And with that, that's pretty much all the ideas they had for episodes. A lot of them seeming to focus on Mai for some reason, which probably would have changed if the show actually went into full development, especially considering that the Sweet 16 comic and the Secret Diary are no longer considered canon by Studio Masa. They themselves in the document saying that Sweet 16 is more of an experiment in drama than an official part of the lore, and by proxy, the Secret Diary which is connected to it would also be non-canon as well. When it comes to the actual production of Ongezellig, there are some questions that got answered. As to firstly, who was the target audience? Said by the creator himself, mostly me, a Dutchman who was not satisfied with the Dutch offerings on YouTube, which could be scaled up to anyone else who identified with it, but it's primarily an intrinsic project. As to what software it was made with, it was animated with TV Paint 11, except Moho being used for some scenes, and then edited with Vegas Pro and composed with FL Studio. In regards to how many people worked on it, parts 1 and 2 were made by Masa himself, excluding the voice actresses. Parts 3 to 6, however, he hired workers and interns. In the end, in addition to himself, we had 4 voice actresses, 4 freelancers, and 4 interns working on Ongezellig, but not all at the same time. As to why Ongezellig is so Dutch, it's because the creator himself is Dutch, which is an actual question he was asked, for some reason. In regards to what is the official insert foreign language translation of Ongezellig, Studio Master says none, since Ongezellig is untranslatable. All attempts to do so, especially unsociable, missed the mark. Translator's note, the name of the animation Ongezellig is often mistranslated to unsociable. There is no direct English translation for Ongezellig. In regards to dubbing, there's a lot of stuff to do with dubbing, TV and film in Europe, and just to be honest, it's so complicated that I'm not even going to go over this section. The best way I can summarize it is that there's massive differences in languages, and with the entire of Europe having so many different languages, it'd just be impractical. Europe alone would need 6 different dubs, at the absolute minimum. I'm just going to summarize it all down. It's just ridiculously complicated. They can't make official dubs because of the resources it would take, and it wouldn't even translate properly. And the dubbing process is different in different parts of Europe, so it's just TLDR, too complicated for them. In regards to if you can dub Ongezellig yourself, however, as Studio Masa himself has said, Amharish dubbing of Ongezellig are, as far as I know, never done by people who actually understand the Dutch language. Usually it is a translation of a translation, and that is asking for mistakes. If you then also have to start interpreting Dutch idioms and references without prior knowledge, I don't expect much good. Dubbing is tolerated, but none is officially recognized. In regards to why there's no merchandise, Ongezellig stands on its own and does not need to be exploited with soulless consumer junk. The only official merchandise was a poster of Mai Zedong, because I could still see the fun in that, but then again it proved too radicalized by spreadsheets guidelines. Only when profit go to charity can I rationalize Ongezellig merch. Why is there merchandise from other projects? I can't translate. Coconuts are not spices, doesn't have a soul to sell, even though I wouldn't have started that today, and the Dutch history iceberg would have educational value. Why not a Patreon? Patreon does not have IDAL, and foreigners could find, I can't pronounce that, quite easily. I got exactly 1 email from a foreigner who really wanted Patreon anyway, and I didn't think it was worth it for that one person. Why is there no insert social media platform on Ongezellig Studio Masa? Social media and its effects have been disastrous for the human race. Wow, Unabomber moment. You can email me, and I'm on the, I can't pronounce that, section of my Discord server for my clients, and if it beyond that, I will leave for what it is. The PetG section of my Discord server. Oh, okay. PetG? I don't fucking know how to pronounce that. Petje. Moving on to the next part of his questions thing. This is not a question, but Jesus, you're really very bad at marketing. C&M culture and society mentality, right? On the other hand, if I'd done more E&M economics and society, you'd probably have a shit animation with excellent promotion right now. Translate a note. C&M and E&M both refers to the collection of courses that a Dutch student in secondary education may take. Sorry if reading this, from the document is especially janky. Keep in mind that this is a Dutch to English translation, so the language is not too smooth. I was actually going to get Factual Hat to record this video with me. I was going to get him to read the Dutch version and translate that to English himself. Albeit at the time of recording this, the 10th of December 2024, Factual Hat is incredibly ill. It got really bad last night. It's a digestive tract issue, but he should be fine by tomorrow. But anyway, with that, now to talk about why Ongezellig stopped and questions in relation to that. Stated in the document, despite the fact that, in my opinion, the official closing fairly cleanly knitted an end to the story, there is apparently still ambiguity about the lack of future of Ongezellig. I have to go into this subject a little more rigorously, then it would like to eliminate all doubts. Regards to those questions, is Ongezellig discontinued / stopped? Yes. Is Ongezellig really discontinued / stopped? Yes. And Ongezellig won't be continued in any medium other than animation either? Yes. Why was Ongezellig discontinued or stopped? The first being burnout as a result of taking on too many responsibilities. Translator's note, roughly translated, this means burnout required less hay on my fork, which is a reference to the Dutch idiom, I can't pronounce that, I'm going to try anyway, te veel gooi op je vork nemen, meaning to take on too much work or responsibility. 2 is exhaustion after working on the same project for 7 years. 3, limited chance of successful pitch. 2, labor intensive for too niche an audience. 4, not convinced that target amount can be achieved and maintained. 5, sufficient and in some cases more support, affinity and enjoyment of history content and its audience. And in summary, for him it was better to pull the plug in a timely manner than to keep it on the line forever. And he expects the same when he becomes demented. And the discontinuation of Ongezellig is due to the sum of these reasons. And essentially to hyperfixate on any of these is just a case of tunnel vision. You know, I'm just going to super summarize this down. He didn't see success in the project, he was getting burned out, and he just saw that other stuff was doing better, so he moved on. And he also does not intend on selling the rights to it, and when asked if someone else could finish Ongezellig or continue it, we can basically summarize his response as, well, you're never going to finish the Diary of Anne Frank, and when you bring the dead back you only get zombies. A little fan art at times is fine, but taking inspiration from Ongezellig for your own creations is much more interesting. Essentially, he doesn't want anyone to continue Ongezellig, because he believes it will be a shadow of its former self. And finally, in regards to the future of Studio Massa, he has plans for hobby projects on Dutch history without the ambitions of a full-time YouTube career, and eventually death. All of this being according to the document, albeit this is translated from Dutch to English, so it isn't going to be perfect, it could mean something else, but whatever. And with that, we're in the final section of the video. I want to talk about why I personally feel like Ongezellig failed. Of course there was the niche audience and such, and of course the lack of reach, primarily because it appeals to 4chan teenager humour, and also the cost of production and how long it took to make, and him also giving up. And another interesting reason is because it appealed to the audience he didn't want, that being people in the Anglosphere. People who didn't have an understanding of a language that couldn't be translated properly, or meaningfully to their own language, without substitutions or some kind of great effort. I personally myself think it was both the medium he chose to create his story, that being animation, and his reluctance to use social media, and lack of social media outreach, that were the 2 biggest crippling factors. If he were to create Ongezellig as a comic, it would have been much easier. It would have cut down the amount of time significantly for production, along with production costs, which would have also simultaneously made it easier to translate, as it's easier to translate written dialogue as opposed to spoken. Plus, it being written would allow him to create context notes, which could be given to a professional translator, allowing for a higher quality translation. It would still have to rely on substitution, and there'll still be a few issues here and there, but it would also make dubbing an animated version of the comic easier, if Studio Massa was able to grow successful enough to do such. And in regards to the social media outreach problem, I'm gonna be honest, he kinda brought that one on himself. And yeah, I know translating something from Dutch to English isn't the cleanest translation, but it'd be a hell of a lot better than having none, especially if you want to appeal to an audience to begin with. And there's clearly a demand for it because the Sneed guy made an English AI translation. But ultimately, in summary, Ongezellig failed because it was too niche to really appeal to the audience he wanted, and was too demanding to produce in comparison to what he got out of it, which is why I personally feel like him making comics would have been more effective, both in a cost and time sense, while sacrificing the minimum amount of quality, and still appeasing the fans that already exist. And it also would have benefited him to have a Patreon anyway, even if just 1 person or 2 uses it, because it would also give him a way to expand into a Western audience as well. But outside of that, that's all I really have to say for this section. And that actually brings us to the end of the video. Well, my disciples, I'll see you around next time. Good day, good night, goodbye.